Have you ever noticed how a single anxious thought can turn into a full-blown panic attack in less than 60 seconds? You're lying in bed, and suddenly you remember something embarrassing you said 3 years ago, and before you know it, your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and you're convinced that everyone you've ever met thinks you're a complete disaster. Or maybe you check your bank account, see a number that's lower than you expected, and within moments your brain has fast-forwarded through an entire catastrophic movie where you're homeless, jobless, and completely alone. I know this feeling intimately, deeply, painfully, because I used to experience it multiple times a day, every single day, until I discovered an ancient Buddhist technique that literally changed everything about how I relate to my own mind. And I'm not talking about some vague advice to just breathe deeply, or think positive thoughts, or visualize your happy place. This is a specific, practical, immediately applicable method that works the moment you use it. And today, I'm going to teach you exactly how to use it, step by step. By the end of this video, you'll have a tool that you can deploy the instant you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that racing of thoughts, that sense that everything is spiraling completely out of control. This technique has literally saved me from countless hours of unnecessary suffering, and I believe it can do the same for you. So what is this technique? It's called mindful noting, and it comes from a branch of Buddhism called vipassana, which means insight meditation. But before you click away thinking this requires years of training, let me stop you right there. This technique is so simple that you can learn it in the next few minutes and start using it immediately without any prior meditation experience whatsoever. The reason it works so powerfully for anxiety is because it interrupts the specific mechanism that turns normal thoughts into anxiety spirals. Anxiety isn't actually caused by the thoughts themselves. It's caused by our relationship to those thoughts, by the way we get tangled up in them and treat them as absolute truth rather than just mental events passing through our consciousness. Let me explain how anxiety spirals work in your brain, because understanding the mechanism makes the solution so much clearer. When you have an anxious thought like "I'm going to fail this presentation," your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, gets activated and sends out stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These create physical sensations like increased heart rate, shallow breathing, and muscle tension. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your conscious mind notices these sensations and interprets them as evidence that something really is wrong. Your brain literally says to itself, "Well, I feel terrible, so that thought must be true and important." This creates a powerful feedback loop. The thought triggers the sensation reinforces the thought, which intensifies the sensation, which makes the thought seem even more real and urgent. This is the spiral, and it can escalate incredibly quickly because each loop amplifies everything. Within seconds, you've gone from mild worry to full-blown panic, and you're completely convinced that disaster is imminent. The brilliant thing about mindful noting is that it breaks this cycle right at the beginning, at the most crucial point, before the spiral has a chance to build any real momentum. Instead of getting caught up in the content of the thought, instead of believing it or arguing with it or trying to suppress it, you simply observe it and label it. In doing so, you activate your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for awareness and metacognition. When you engage this part of your brain, you automatically reduce activity in the amygdala. It's like switching from the panic button to the observation deck. You're still aware of the thought, but you're no longer fused with it, no longer treating it as reality. So how do you actually practice mindful noting? The technique is remarkably simple, which is actually part of its genius. The moment you notice an anxious thought arising in your mind, you silently label it with a simple, neutral word or phrase. You might say to yourself, thinking or worrying or planning or remembering or imagining. The specific word doesn't matter as much as the act of labeling itself. What you're doing is creating a moment of recognition, a pause in the automatic flow of thoughts. You're acknowledging that yes, there is a thought happening here, and I am aware of it. That's it. You're not trying to make the thought go away. You're not judging yourself for having it. You're not getting into an internal debate about whether it's rational or irrational, helpful or unhelpful. You're simply noting its presence with the same neutral observation you might use to note that it's raining outside, or that a car just drove past. Oh, it's raining. Oh, I'm worrying. Same energy, Same neutral tone, same lack of drama. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works in a real situation. You're about to go into a job interview, and the thought pops up, I'm going to mess this up. Everyone will see I'm not qualified. Without mindful noting, here's what typically happens. You hear that thought and immediately you believe it. You feel it as truth in your body. Your stomach clenches, your hands start to sweat, your mouth goes dry, and then your mind starts producing evidence to support the thought, building a case against you. Remember that time you blanked on a simple question in your last interview? Remember how you stumbled over your words in that meeting last week? See, you're definitely going to mess this up. You're probably not even qualified for this job. Why did you even apply? Now you're not just nervous, you're spiraling into full panic mode, and you haven't even walked into the room yet. But with mindful noting, here's how it works. The thought arises, I'm going to mess this up. Everyone will see I'm not qualified. But instead of engaging with the content, instead of treating it as a factual prediction about the future, you simply note it. You say to yourself, thinking, or worrying, or anxiety thought, just that simple label. And something remarkable happens in that moment. The thought loses its grip. It's still there, you can still hear it in your mind, but it no longer feels like absolute truth. It feels like what it actually is, which is just one thought among thousands that your brain produces every day, many of which are not accurate, not helpful, and not worth taking seriously. The physical sensations might still be present. Your heart might still be beating a little faster. But because you didn't feed the thought with your attention and belief, because you didn't add that second layer of panic, it doesn't escalate into a full spiral. You note the thought, maybe note the physical sensation too. Oh, heart racing. And then you can redirect your attention back to what you're actually doing, which is preparing for your interview. Now, I want to be really clear about something important. Mindful noting is not the same as positive thinking or trying to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. This is crucial to understand because so much anxiety advice tells you to just think differently, to challenge your negative thoughts, to replace them with affirmations. And while cognitive restructuring has its place in therapy, it's not what we're doing here. When you're in the middle of an anxiety spiral, trying to think positively often backfires completely. Why? Because you're still engaged in the content of the thought. You're still treating the thought as something significant that needs to be dealt with. You're still giving it power and importance. With mindful noting, you're not debating with your thoughts. You're not engaging with their content at all. You're simply acknowledging that thinking is happening, and then you're gently moving on. This simplicity is actually its power. Anxiety spirals are fueled by engagement and resistance. When you stop engaging, when you stop resisting, the whole mechanism loses its fuel and begins to settle naturally. You can note different types of thoughts and experiences throughout your practice. For future anxieties, the what-if thoughts and predictions, you might note worrying or planning or imagining. For past rumination, when you're replaying conversations or dwelling on mistakes, you might note remembering or replaying or judging. For worst-case scenarios, when your mind is catastrophizing, note catastrophizing or storytelling. You can also note physical sensations. And this is actually incredibly helpful because the physical sensations of anxiety often feed the mental spiral just as much as the thoughts themselves. Heart racing, stomach tight, hands sweating, chest heavy, breathing shallow. By noting the sensations, you create that same space of awareness. You're recognizing that yes, there are physical sensations happening, and they're just sensations. They're not dangerous, they're not permanent, they're not evidence that something terrible is happening. They're simply the body's natural response to perceived threat, even when that threat exists only in your imagination. One question I get asked frequently is, how long do I have to do this? Do I need to note every single thought all day long? Won't that be exhausting? The answer is no. You don't need to note every thought. In fact, most of the time you won't be noting anything at all, because most of the time you're naturally engaged with your life. You're having conversations, working on projects, enjoying activities, living your day. Mindful noting is specifically a tool for those moments when you notice that anxiety is starting to take over, when you feel that familiar sensation of your thoughts beginning to spiral, when you realize you're getting tangled up in worry or panic. That's when you deploy this technique. You note the thoughts and sensations until you feel that grip loosening, until you feel yourself coming back to the present moment, back to a place where you can choose what to focus on rather than being dragged along helplessly by the anxiety. In my experience, when I first started, I would sometimes note dozens of thoughts during an anxiety episode. Worrying, planning, catastrophizing, judging, fearing, over and over. At first it felt mechanical, even a bit awkward, but I kept going because I could feel it was working. Each note created a tiny bit of space between me and the anxiety. After a few weeks of consistent practice, the spiral started less often. My brain was learning a new pattern, developing a new habit of catching itself before getting completely swept away. What if you note thoughts and anxiety doesn't disappear? That's completely normal. Mindful noting isn't about making anxiety vanish. It's about changing your relationship to it. If you can observe anxious feelings rather than being consumed by them, that's success. Think of anxiety like a wave in the ocean. Before mindful noting, when a wave came, you'd get knocked over and tumbled around. After learning it, you still feel the wave's power, but you can surf it. You're not fighting it or being pulled under. You're staying aware even in the difficult experience. Mindful noting is especially powerful for health anxiety. You notice a weird body sensation, your mind jumps to the worst explanation, you Google symptoms and spiral hard. Your anxiety creates more physical sensations, which your brain interprets as proof something's wrong. Mindful noting breaks this cycle. Instead of catastrophizing, you simply note the sensation. Tightness, tingling. Then note the anxious thought. Worrying. You create space between sensation and interpretation. Interrupting the jump from this feels weird to this is dangerous. When I note physical sensations without catastrophic interpretation, they usually pass much quicker than when I fixate on them. This technique is based on a deep Buddhist understanding of how minds create suffering. In Buddhism, suffering comes not from experiences themselves, but from our relationship to them, specifically from clinging to pleasant experiences and pushing away unpleasant ones. With anxiety, we desperately try to push away anxious thoughts and feelings, and that resistance creates more suffering. When you practice mindful noting, you stop fighting. You let the thought be there. You observe it without battling it, and paradoxically, this gives it less power over you. Like any skill, mindful noting gets stronger with practice. The first few times might feel clumsy. Your brain is used to its anxiety patterns. You're building a new neural pathway, and that takes repetition. Be patient. Don't expect one try to cure your anxiety forever, but with consistent practice, especially when anxiety starts building, you will improve. The gap between you and thoughts becomes more obvious. The spiral loses momentum faster. You catch yourself earlier, sometimes before the spiral really starts. Here's a helpful tip. Set aside 5 minutes daily to practice noting when calm, not just when anxious. Sit quietly and observe your mind. When a thought arises, note it. This builds the awareness muscle, making noting more automatic when you really need it during crisis. It's like a fire drill, so you know what to do when there's real fire. After you note a thought, what happens next? You gently redirect attention to the present moment. Come back to what's actually happening right here, right now. Bring attention to your breath, feeling air moving in and out. Notice what you can see around you, what sounds you hear. Return to whatever activity you are doing. The noting creates space, and you use that space to ground yourself in present reality rather than the anxious story your mind was telling. This is crucial because anxiety almost always involves dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. In the actual present moment, right now, things are usually okay. You're breathing, your heart is beating, you're alive. When you note thoughts and return to the present, you're reality testing, checking what's actually true now versus what your mind is claiming is true. Let me give you another example. You send a text to a friend, and they don't respond for hours. Your anxiety kicks in. They're mad at me, I said something wrong, they're going to end the friendship. Without mindful noting, you spend hours consumed by these thoughts, checking your phone constantly, feeling terrible. With mindful noting, you notice the thought they're mad at me and note it. Worrying. You notice thoughts about being alone. Catastrophizing. You notice the urge to check your phone. Anxious urge. Then you bring yourself to the present. Right now, I'm at my desk. My friend hasn't responded yet, and I don't know why. That's all I know. I can feel anxiety, but I don't have to feed it with attention. I can note it and continue my day. When your friend texts sorry, was in a meeting, you realize you could have saved hours of suffering. Something powerful happens with mindful noting over time. It builds self-compassion. When you start noting thoughts, you see how many you have, and how many are repetitive and not logical. You see the same anxious thoughts appearing again and again, and there's something almost humorous about it. Oh, there's that thought again. This observation naturally leads to gentleness toward yourself. You realize your mind is just doing what minds do, producing thoughts based on old patterns and fears. Those thoughts aren't you. They don't reflect your worth. They're just mental habits. Just like you wouldn't judge yourself for having an itchy nose, you don't need to judge yourself for having anxious thoughts. They're just mental weather passing through. This understanding that mindful noting cultivates is transformative. Some worry that noting will make them emotionless or detached. The opposite happens. When you're not consumed by anxiety, when you're not spending energy spiraling about imagined catastrophes, you have more capacity to show up fully for real life. You can be more present with people you love, engage more deeply with work, appreciate moments of joy without that background worry. Mindful noting doesn't make you care less. It frees energy so you can care more about what actually matters, rather than wasting it on mental loops that serve no purpose. As you practice, you might notice physical anxiety symptoms become more manageable. They might still occur, but they're less overwhelming. It's the difference between heart racing plus, oh my God, I'm dying, versus heart racing plus, that's what anxiety does. It's uncomfortable but not dangerous. The first amplifies the sensation with fear. The second acknowledges reality without catastrophic overlay. For panic attacks specifically, use noting to observe each element as it arises. Heart pounding, breathing fast, feeling dizzy, thoughts racing. Note neutrally like a scientist observing an experiment. Remind yourself this is a panic attack. It feels terrible but isn't dangerous, and it will pass. By noting rather than fighting, panic often peaks more quickly and subsides faster. You're working with your nervous system, not against it. Now let's talk about integrating this into daily life. You don't need to be a monk. You need a practical tool for regular life. Wake up with dread. Note what's happening before getting up, worrying, fearing. Then bring attention to lying in bed, the softness, the warmth. During your commute, stuck in traffic and catastrophizing about being late, note it. Frustration. Worry. Then return to your breath. At work, getting critical feedback. Note anxious thoughts before they spiral. Lying in bed at night with racing thoughts. Note each one and gently guide attention back to your body resting. You can do this anywhere, anytime. No special equipment, no dedicated time, nobody needs to know. It's an internal practice that becomes an always available tool. The more you use it, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, an anxious thought arises, and before the spiral starts, there's this moment of recognition, this gentle noting, and the thought loses its grip. You've trained your brain to have a healthier response. Learning this skill can feel awkward at first, like any new skill. You might try it and think this isn't working. I'm still anxious. Remember two things. First, the goal isn't immediate anxiety disappearance, but changing your relationship to it, which happens gradually. Second, your awareness itself means it's working. You're already creating space by attempting to observe. Be patient and gentle with yourself. In Buddhism, there's a teaching about two arrows. The first arrow is the painful experience itself, an emotion, a situation, physical pain. That's part of being human. We all get hit by first arrows, but then we shoot ourselves with a second arrow, which is our reaction to the first, our resistance, our judgment, our story about what it means. The second arrow is optional, but we usually shoot ourselves automatically. With anxiety, the first arrow might be a real worry. The second arrow is the catastrophic spiral, the hours of rumination, the physical tension, the story about what your anxiety means. Mindful noting helps you see the second arrow before shooting yourself. You experience the first arrow without adding extra suffering. You might still feel anxious, but you're not suffering about your suffering. So here's what I want you to do. The next time you notice yourself spiraling into anxiety, try mindful noting. Don't wait for full panic. Catch it early. When you notice the first anxious thought, simply note it. Worrying, thinking, fearing. Whatever feels right. Note physical sensations too. Heart racing, stomach tight. Do this with gentleness and neutrality. You're not fixing or changing anything, just observing, acknowledging what's present. Then gently bring attention back to the present moment. What can you see, hear? What are you actually doing now? Ground yourself in reality rather than the story your mind is telling. Continue your day. Thoughts might return. That's okay. Note them again. Come back to the present again. You're building a new pattern, one moment at a time. This Buddhist technique has been practiced for thousands of years because it works. It's based on deep understanding of how minds create suffering and how we can free ourselves. It doesn't require belief or adopting any worldview. It's just a practical tool, mental technology you can use to interrupt anxiety spirals and reclaim peace. I genuinely believe this can change your life, like it changed mine. Not overnight, not magically, but gradually as you practice. You deserve to live without constant anxiety hijacking. You deserve to experience life directly, rather than through worry and fear. Mindful noting can help you get there. It's simple, powerful, and available right now. Please try it. Be patient as you learn. Notice how it feels to create even a little space between you and anxious thoughts. That space is where your freedom lives.